Welcome to the WAN Manager podcast. I'm your host, Bryan from TeleGeography, and today we're going to be talking about sourcing internet. So our guest is Mike Lloyd from Globalinternet, and he is going to take us through all of the challenges and ways to overcome those challenges in buying internet from ISPs around the globe. So whether you are getting internet as part of a hybrid MPLS solution, maybe adding a second line for SD-WAN or just local breakouts for SaaS applications, or going all the way into the Internet Sea and getting rid of MPLS altogether, the modern WAN increasingly includes internet in addition to or in place of those telco services. So before I start talking with Mike, I wanted to set the conversation up, as I like to do, with some data that we have collected at TeleGeography that speaks to all of this, right? So first, from our WAN Manager survey, we've asked WAN managers about their ISP selection process. And it turns out static IP addresses are the most important factor in choosing an ISP, but very closely behind that was the available product type. So they are sensitive to whether they're getting fiber to the premises, ADSL or SDSL, DOCSIS, etc. What was really interesting to me, though, especially in the interviews that we did for that survey, was that for some providers, or for some enterprises rather, having a tier 1 internet provider was really crucial. It didn't show up as a key factor for most, but it was the key factor for some folks who were really thinking about how their traffic was being routed. So definitely going to ask Mike about that. And then we asked about internet integration into the network. So in terms of average product use across WAN sites, enterprises were running DIA at about a third of sites and business broadband at about a fifth, which is still both of those less than MPLS. Of course, that's changing, right? So our data that I'm referring to aggregate 2018 and 2019 responses. We fully expect the internet and broadband to grow in prominence in the WAN, while MPLS is likely to shrink. It's also important to note that some respondents, of course, had internet already at 100% of sites. Just those averages are brought down by those respondents who were still relying entirely on MPLS. And then finally, of course, one thing that I'm sure kind of will permeate the whole conversation with Mike, the reason that people are interested in adding internet in many cases is price, right? So I have a whole blog series about this. Go to blog.telegeography.com and you can click on my name and find this entire series. But I created a hypothetical network to price out how all MPLS networks compare to various hybrid alternatives. Some of the updates from this year to that series deal with this, but the main one was called Wargaming Your WAN. The upshot of all of that hasn't really changed in the past year since I did that series, which is that a few really key points emerge. One, DIA is still pretty much universally cheaper than MPLS, especially when you can source it without an additional access line. Two, broadband is even cheaper than DIA. This is often by orders of magnitude. Of course, there's different levels of service involved there. DIA comes with carrier grade SLAs and no contention and that sort of thing. But no matter what you choose, internet allows you to increase bandwidth and often cut costs at the same time. So in my hypotheticals, we were often doubling, tripling, even more than that, the amount of available bandwidth per office compared to the all MPLS option, while still cutting cost, your total cost of ownership, annual TCO, by 40, 50, 60% or more. So that kind of sets the stage for why we're thinking about internet sourcing. And there's certainly other reasons from a networking standpoint, in addition to just price and that sort of thing. So we're going to listen to Mike talk about the best practices for sourcing that internet and how to best integrate it into your WAN. So without further ado, on to the interview. My guest is Mike Lloyd from Globalinternet. So, Mike, you've been with us at a lot of WAN summits, probably on some panels that I've moderated, and I always start them this way. Just could you briefly tell us about Globalinternet and what role you play at that organization?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Greg. So at Globalinternet, we source, deliver, and manage internet access anywhere in the world, taking away the stresses from doing it yourself. We help our customers select internet that's right for them, be it mobile, broadband, or dedicated internet access. So we take full responsibility for ordering and delivery of the services. Our customers just have to work with us, and we work with all the ISPs. And once the services are delivered, we manage any day-to-day issues that arise. You can reach us 24/7 at one of our global NOCs, which are in Amsterdam, Sao Paulo, and Manila, and we'll deal with the ISP in whatever time zone or language is required. So today we have around 1,400 ISPs on our books, and we have over 9,000 live services with 600 odd enterprises in a variety of sectors. We have a multi-channel model. We work directly with enterprises, also through MSPs and SIs, and in fact, our services are what sits behind many of the global carrier offers.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Excellent.
We're 100% focused on internet. Sorry, I'm still going.
No, so please,
we're,
please.
we're 100% focused on internet. It's all we do. Our systems, processes, and staff are internet dedicated. And in fact, this pure focus is what makes us attractive to partners, we think, because we don't compete with them. And my role at Globalinternet is as Chief Portfolio Officer. I handle all the product management, the pricing, marketing, and procurement for the business. So I make sure we've got the right services available at the right price and that they're clear and understandable. And since I only joined Globalinternet last year in 2019, I've been building up the direct enterprise portfolio that we're now calling Internet as a Service. And I'm also heavily involved in our automation work with APIs and portals being a key part of our customer and provider strategy.
Excellent. Sounds like you're a guy who's going to have some answers. So that's great.
Hope so.
Yeah. All right. So, the primary target audience of this podcast are global multinational WAN managers, IT infrastructure managers, and of course the folks like you that provide services to them. So let's imagine that I'm playing the role of a WAN manager with maybe a few hundred, maybe even a few thousand sites around the world, and I am looking to add internet across the network. So in the past, I've mostly gone to my telco or maybe a couple telcos for MPLS. And now I want to talk about what kind of challenges would that person face for buying DIA or even broadband from a wide variety of providers. And I thought the first way to maybe break this up, because I know that's a big topic, is what's so different about internet and MPLS. So if I'm used to thinking about MPLS sourcing and the issues that go with that, what do I need to think differently about with sourcing internet?
Okay, so I actually spent most of my fairly recent career working in an MPLS environment. So, and having switched to internet, it's something I'm seeing firsthand. So, the first challenge is deciding what you need. Balancing cost against performance is really important, because in an internet world, you're going to have a lot more choice than you did in an MPLS world.
Mm-hmm.
So, if we start with bandwidth, not all bandwidth is equal. Dedicated internet access, DIA, is the premium internet access service. It's normally delivered on an Ethernet leased line, so you'll always get full speed access to the bandwidth purchased on the local internet, and you'll get symmetrical access as standard.
Mm-hmm.
Broadband, though, is delivered normally as a heavily oversubscribed service. So, and unless you're taking a pure fiber option, then the bandwidth that's going to be delivered will be unpredictable, and you'll see variances in the network performance. So, speed, latency, loss, are going to vary and depend on usage by others in your area or your region.
So basically, the same kind of service we get as consumers, contended, all that sort of thing, but just with maybe a few little business friendly kind of availability metrics or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, you might actually think that business broadband would, be a big step up from consumer broadband, and it may be in some areas,
Hmm.
but actually the main difference we see is actually the sort of additional features like the break fix service wrap and the IP addressing options you're going to get rather than the underlying bandwidth performance itself. And yeah, and but the IP routing and the like is really important. Understanding the availability and the costs, for example, for a /29 subnet or BGP routing
Hmm.
is important if you need it, and not all products are going to support that.
Right.
So you need to be careful in the choices you're making to either avoid excess cost or making mistakes.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and likewise on the service wrap, because the market is that much broader. Internet comes with a much wider range of options than were normal from an MPLS access type. And so your break fix can be anything from a best effort, so the provider will get around to fixing it when they've got resources and when they're in the area, maybe, through to you can buy at significant premium, mind you, a break fix with an 8 or a 4 hour repair. Everything is possible, really. So
Hmm.
making a good choice based on what you need is really key.
Yeah,
You
absolutely.
yeah. And you also mentioned, I think, in your question about the on-net connectivity. So understanding, for example, if your local Azure or AWS cloud is on net to the ISP that you're considering can be really important to your application performance. Um, and then there's one last gotcha with internet products. If you get through all of that, then actually you've selected a product, you've selected a provider, but many internet types, the actual availability, can you order it? Can the provider deliver it to
Mm.
a particular location? Is unpredictable until you come to make the actual order and place the order with the provider.
Right. That was a headache that you used to, with MPLS, pass almost entirely onto your
Yeah,
telco, who had
yeah,
a big sourcing
yeah.
team to deal with all of this. So that keeps me up then, I think, for my next question, which is about that provider mix. So again, if I've been on a mostly MPLS network, I maybe had a single global provider. I maybe had a few, telcos providing my MPLS around the world. But when I go into the universe of internet providers, there we have, I think, 7,000, something like that, ISPs profiled in our broadband service. I may be looking at least at dozens of potential suppliers if I have a truly global network. So across a bunch of different countries with a bunch of different smaller ISPs that maybe only operate in a few countries, what are the key challenges there for the WAN manager who's jumping into this internet world?
Good question. So, I mean, we started with the product bit, but actually, that's probably the easy bit.
Hmm.
The hard bit is actually finding the right local internet supplier and then engaging with them, efficiently and effectively. So, I think I mentioned this at the start, but to give you an idea, you've got 7,000 on your radar. We're actually engaged contractually with 1,400 ISPs,
Hmm.
and I'm active with around about 600 of them on a regular basis. But then I'm adding more each week as well because it's necessary to get the right products and the right services. Um, yeah, and I don't do it for fun.
Yeah, that's right. Rather not have to deal with 1,400 different companies, right? Yeah.
Exactly. So I do it to make sure I get the best performing services and great value.
Hmm.
And you just can't get a competitive global solution by dealing with 20 or 30 parties, let alone two or three.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So yeah, and with that, of course, comes the challenge. To achieve the performance and the economic advantage of internet, then you're going to have to deal with lots of these suppliers, and at a local level, which is going to be complex. So you're going to have some kind of understanding of whether the provider is reliable and trustworthy, without actually probably ever having done any business with them before if you're going alone.
Yep.
And which might be all right if they were all reliable and trustworthy. Sadly, they're not all. Um, you're going to have to work out how to order, because organizations that are dealing at a domestic level are going to expect you to follow their standard processes, so their forms, their portals. Also, you're going to have to deal in local languages. You
Hmm.
won't get by in English alone.
Right. Right. Yeah, and have
Yeah,
someone in that country that has at least enough IT knowledge to know what to look for, how to order, and that sort of thing, which may be a tall order for a lot of MNCs.
Exactly, and there isn't exactly a common standard definition of what products are called either. So
Hmm.
you do need people
Oh,
who've got a modicum of experience
I know that
and
pain
knowledge about
very
what they're
well.
sourcing.
So we even among telcos, we send out surveys, and they're like, "What do you mean by this?" Right? So yeah.
Yeah, indeed. And then when you've got your order in, how are you going to know it's making progress? Because all the ISPs are going to have different processes, and of course they're going to be in different time zones, and some of them may only offer certain support in their own local time, which is fine when I'm going from, say, the UK where I am to the Netherlands or Germany.
Hmm.
But if I'm trying to get an update on a service in New Zealand, that's going to be a little bit harder.
Absolutely.
And then when they do deliver, the test and turn up processes are going to be different. So how are you going to make sure you've got what you've ordered and it's working? And when it's in life, how are you going to manage it? I mean, even basic stuff like paying the bills, the invoices are going to come in a local currency. Maybe the expected contractual payment terms and dates are going to be different. You're going to have to get stuff fixed when it breaks. And, so how are you going to know who to contact, who to escalate to?
Hmm.
Have you got people in with the right time zone placement and with the right language skills? All of these things are going to be essential if you're going to actually run a successful internet-based solution.
Yeah, one really interesting comment from one of the WAN managers we interviewed for our WAN manager survey a couple of years ago was that when you've been used to having tens of millions of dollars of spend with a telco, you get a certain amount of attention when there's a
Yeah,
problem, and
yeah,
when you're spending a whole lot less than that with a small company, that's not nearly that kind of response. So.
yeah. And it's also, you may be spending tens of millions of dollars, and you may also be spending at a sort of site level, maybe thousands of dollars.
Hmm.
You may now actually be spending
Dozens, right?
100 or dozens of
Yeah,
dollars
yeah, exactly.
exactly.
Yeah. All right. So, given those kind of potential, problems that people could run into, are there parts of the world? We are telegeography, of course, so we're always interested in how things play out differently over different geographic locations. What parts of the world do you find most difficult for internet sourcing?
Um, yeah, I mean, doing this in scale, even across the US and Europe, can be hard enough,
Hmm.
but
Hmm.
some are a real stretch, of course. And we've recently just shared some of our experiences in some blog posts of our own for three areas of the world that we see as challenging. I've got some experience on, and that's in China, in
Mm.
Latin America, and in Middle East and Africa. And getting a solution that delivers for you in each of these can be a real challenge.
Yeah, for all different reasons, right?
Yeah,
So yeah.
yeah.
So what do you at Global Internet do to sort of make those problems go away or mitigate them for the enterprise?
Okay. Well, the thing that's common to each of them is complexity. What
Mm.
you can do, what you can't do, who's going to help, who's going to say they will help but won't, and who or what might outright disrupt you in your plans.
Hmm.
And the common solution, solution-wise to these, is that it's about relationships and experience with the local providers. There is nothing that substitutes for having done business directly with somebody in these areas. We know who we can trust,
Right.
and importantly, in return, the ISPs know that they can trust us. They know that we're going to treat them fairly. They know we're going to pay them on time,
Right.
and they
Yeah.
know that we're going to bring them repeat business.
And
So,
that they can
yeah,
actually deliver reliable internet service to some degree, right?
no,
So, yeah.
exactly. Exactly, we've got a whole raft of data on that, and which helps us inform our decisions and decisions we help our customers make. Um, so if we look at each of those areas, maybe we start with China. I mean, obviously the Chinese firewall,
Hmm.
potentially a big barrier, and if managed incorrectly or your approach to this is managed incorrectly, it will either result in poor or no international connectivity for your
Hmm.
sites in China. But managed appropriately, you can run from China internationally perfectly well. It's just how you do it. Also, China is big. There's no prizes for stating that.
Right. Yeah.
What's what's less obvious is the amount of diversity and complexity in the market there.
Mm.
Having to deal with the local ISPs on the ground. For example, some buildings may favor specific ISPs, which can be a real challenge if you're trying to construct a resilient solution for an enterprise, because your choices can be limited.
Right.
Also, the sort of the size and the relaxation of the historical constraints commercially there bring both opportunity and challenge. So the relaxation has allowed many small and medium-sized ISPs to appear, and some of these offer great services and definitely can offer the best commercial value for money. However, hidden amongst them are some that are trying to make a fast buck.
Of course.
They're looking for loopholes. They're looking to exploit you. And as and when you do get caught, and you will get caught eventually, your service won't be working anymore. And then Latin America, completely different. We all know the great cities: Buenos Aires, Lima, Bogota, Santiago, so on. However, that's not necessarily where the business is, where where enterprises need to be to run their businesses. So we know less about, or we as an industry know less about the smaller, remoter towns where much of that economy is happening. The mining, agriculture, manufacturing, for example.
Right.
And in Latin America, it's quite common for the internet infrastructure not to be there in the scale that's required to operate. So what you need in those circumstances is relationships with people who are prepared to build on your behalf, and
right.
And will trust you, and know that you're going to bring them business and pay the bills, all that stuff that's necessary for them to make that investment.
And can do a truck roll when somebody crashes into the pole that the wires are on,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah. Exactly. And of course in LATAM, language really matters. You are not going to get by in English.
Right.
Also in Brazil specifically, the way the licensing and the laws work, you will have to have specific licensing to work with certain providers in order to get the services you're likely to need. So we have that, but it's the sort of lessons you learn by doing it.
Right. Finally, the Middle East, right? So
the Middle East is
everybody in the MPLS world is well familiar with the key problem in the Middle East being that service that costs a couple $100 in Europe costs $10,000 in Dubai, right? So, yeah,
indeed, and sadly, not all of those problems those go away, but some of them can go away. And but again, what might not seem possible through a literal reading of regulations can by a pragmatic way of working and trusted relationships with the local providers can actually result in some pretty positive outcomes for our customers. And also, I think I mentioned Africa as well. I mean, Africa is always going to be a bit bumpier than the rest of the world, to say the least. But again, relationships are key. We've got lots of happy customers in Africa. We've even got customers we're doing a great job for in places like Libya and Somalia, which is very, very difficult. So it's pretty much anything is possible with the right knowledge, right experience, right relationships.
Today's episode is brought to you by the WAN Manager Digest. This exclusive subscription service is for enterprise professionals who manage large corporate networks. What it does is it bundles our most popular WAN resources into one toolbox with a single login. So here's what you get: key findings from TeleGeography's Cloud and WAN Infrastructure Report, excerpts from TeleGeography's SD-WAN Research Service, network services pricing updates, analysis from our new WAN Manager survey, and of course, field reports from the latest WAN Summit events. You can get more information about that at telegeography.com or click the link in today's show notes to learn more. One thing that I've noticed, Mike, in our WAN Manager survey, we can break some of our questions out by industry. And we found some pretty significant differences in internet adoption by vertical or economic segment. So, for example, healthcare companies in our survey reported using very little internet, with an average of 90% of their sites still on MPLS and only 6% on DIA. So there's some verticals where there's a reticence for this, right? So what do you say if you approach one of these WAN managers from an industry like that? There's others that are sort of maybe more conservative or slow to adopt. How do you convince them to hand their traffic off to Acme ISP operating in a few cities somewhere, even when maybe they have SD-WAN and maybe a local security solution or a cloud security solution? Do you have something to push them over the edge to make that change?
Interesting question. I mean, actually, one of our major direct enterprise customers is in the healthcare sector.
There you go. So you did it at least once, right? Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But naturally, some sectors and businesses are more cautious than others. But we do see this changing rapidly, and I don't think any sector is immune or can afford to ignore what the internet and cloud is delivering, because it truly is revolutionary from a cost and a performance point of view. The sheer scale and intensity of demand that comes from the consumer world has just changed the landscape fundamentally. So, and what do I mean? So, in our daily lives, we all rely on the internet in a way that's, more data intensive, more bandwidth hungry, more performance sensitive than most of the stuff we do at work.
Especially in
Just maybe
2020,
also,
right?
oh, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So public internet and cloud can deliver performance-wise, and the 4 billion plus consumers globally create an economy of scale that is just unimaginable for business alone, and that creates an irresistible result. So yes, some performance challenges do remain, and certainly it brings some security challenges. But anyone sitting on MPLS that thinks they don't need to pay attention to this is short-sighted, I think.
Yeah.
And as we've been talking about earlier in this interview, the barriers to doing it successfully are significant. And the old partners that enterprises relied on in an MPLS world may not be best placed to help in the new world. But that's why we exist in Global Internet, to help take away those barriers and the complexity. So the complexity is our friend.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that's really interesting, because we still see in our surveys of WAN managers a majority of customers keeping at least some MPLS. Some of that is really limited, maybe core sites, or they've lowered the port sizes. Is your customer set different? Are they adding internet for a hybrid kind of network, or do you have a lot of customers that are jumping all the way into the internet sea, as it were?
Yeah. So with customers that come to us direct, we do largely see those that are going for a pure internet solution. And the trend for that's definitely increasing. In 2020, we've had a big increase in customers approaching us across many sectors, manufacturing, high tech, retail, professional services, and finance. We've got engagements in all of those sectors going on right now. For the customers that come to us or that we serve through MSPs and SIs, the balance is also quite strongly towards pure internet, I'd say, but some hybrid does appear in there. We also partner with carriers, though, and that's where we do see and I guess naturally we see it because of the history of the relationships and the MPLS capability. So when we're working through or with a carrier, then actually, yes, we'd see part of the demand, but then we wouldn't be satisfying the overall solution, because that would be what the carrier MPLS solution would be delivering.
Right, you're providing them with sourcing capabilities for their customers in that part, but you might not even have that much visibility into what the rest of the telco network looks like.
Exactly.
Yeah, right.
Gotcha. Exactly.
All right. So in the beginning here, I mentioned some data from our WAN manager survey about how what factors were key to selecting an ISP from the WAN manager perspective, and having a tier one provider actually isn't one of the key factors across the board. But then we've done some interviews, heard some folks at the WAN Summit that actually think that is the most critical thing. So in other words, they're looking for a provider that could handle their traffic without many handoffs or hops between destinations, maybe even stay on that provider's network all the way around many of their WAN sites. So if you have a customer like that who's really sensitive to having a tier one provider, is that something you can accommodate? Somebody looking for that kind of higher level of service, or are you sort of only able to work with just whatever the best providers are in their cities, that sort of thing?
Yeah, so maybe I'll be a little bit controversial here,
Sure.
but a tier one internet provider, it's a term that I hear a lot.
Do you believe in that term, I guess is the real question, right? Yeah.
And what does it mean, and what does it actually mean versus what do people think it
Mm-hmm.
means? And so a tier one is an internet provider that's delivering the backbone of the internet globally. So long distance or regional connectivity, if you like. And what they're not generally are scale local internet providers. So tier ones will typically have just a handful of local pops in any country or region.
Mm-hmm.
So any locally routed traffic, and that's likely to be the majority of your traffic, is going to be taken in and out of those major pops rather than directly to source. And that's going to add latency and it's going to add cost.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So the ISPs that have got scale within a country are not normally tier one providers.
Right.
They're going to have great connectivity to the tier ones, but they're also going to have dense local infrastructure that's going to mean optimal local routing and that cloud services locally are on net. So for most businesses, for their sites to be connected well, that means so good performing, lowest latency bandwidth, direct connections into local Azure, AWS, Google, whatever, and the right price, then you absolutely don't want to be on a tier one ISP.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
So
Yeah.
so smart selection of your local ISP is key to performance. So at Globalinternet, we certify our ISP providers across a range of points, which include security, network performance, and service quality. And we can provide insight at a detailed level to the connectivity, both local and global, of the ISPs. And and if your particular architecture does require you to have critical performance delivered for data that's being shipped largely around the globe, and then you're also prepared to pay the premium, then then tier ones
Mm-hmm.
can be a good choice. But there's other ways to do that as well. Maybe better ways. One of the partners we work with is a company called Teridion, which enables a global internet backbone or an internet-like backbone that you'd struggle to differentiate in performance terms from MPLS, but
Mm-hmm.
at pricing that's internet-like.
Middle mile
Yeah,
optimization, the new frontier after SD-WAN, right? Yeah.
exactly.
Interesting. So ultimately, if I'm a WAN manager, obviously it depends on exactly what my pain points are. If inter-office capability, is inter-office traffic is my key concern. But that you're saying that a good ISP locally will have a direct connection into those tier one backbone
Yeah,
providers for the global
yeah,
bit, so it shouldn't really ultimately matter that much.
exactly. Yeah,
Excellent. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I know there's WAN managers out there who will say, no, that doesn't work for me. But like I said, the majority in our survey aren't actually that concerned with it. So it sounds like the majority would
yeah,
be with that. So Mike, we really can't have a conversation these days without talking about the pandemic and remote work, right? So here in the U.S., we're starting to open up, but it's still the case that around a third of workers are working from home. Presumably, most of them are using consumer broadband to connect to the WAN. And I think what is really interesting about that is those broadband connections are likely a larger capacity than they had
Yeah.
MPLS connected to their office, though of course contended not coming with SLAs and whatnot. So I saw a few weeks back a survey by IBM that had indicated a majority of workers want to keep working from home at least part-time after this is over. I myself have been working from home part-time for about 8 years. And I imagine it's possible employers will start to like the idea of not paying as much rent in expensive downtown office space, or even for those large MPLS connections they haven't gotten rid of. First, I'm curious, just your personal opinion. Do you think that distributed remote work will become more the norm after the shutdowns are all lifted?
Great question. If I could answer that one definitively, I think I'd
Yeah,
be, I think I'd be in a great place. You're absolutely right. When your home broadband has to deliver high definition TV, low latency gaming, and just be there always, it's just got to work, and it's got to work brilliantly. It, you know, it gives you an environment that, as we were talking earlier, does just deliver for what work needs. Um, and you know what, the internet's done pretty well. We were holding our breath in those early days, thinking,
yeah,
what's is it gonna work, isn't it going to work? And I saw some analysis from the CTO of BT over here in the UK, just published some network data that showed that actually the daily peak from everybody that was home working and all of the furloughed people doing entertaining themselves during the day was around about 50% of the evening peak in normal times. So actually,
right.
this, in absolute traffic terms, just hasn't stressed the internet much at all.
Yeah,
Um,
the thing I often say is that probably the biggest constriction point for a lot of people has been just the number of devices connected to your home Wi-Fi, right?
yeah,
So if
yeah,
you have
absolutely.
kids who each have two or three devices, and you've got your phone and your laptop, and then if your most likely failure has been the home router, more than the central office, right? So,
Yeah, yeah, and broadband's getting faster and faster. I'm sitting here in a very rural part of the UK in Oxfordshire, and
mhm,
I'm on a relatively old technology. I'm on a VDSL link that when I last speed tested it was doing about 70 meg, which
mhm, mhm.
5 years ago I'd have thought would have been nirvana, but today feels a bit slow. But
Yeah,
but actually they're digging up the street in the next 2 weeks, and I'm going to be on a 900 meg PON
nice.
service soon. So
Yeah.
um, so the capabilities are just increasing, but also it isn't just about broadband as well. So I most of what we source actually is DIA, dedicated internet, and I can
My
see.
partner in crime. Sorry. it's, it's working. We're talking about working from home, and my dog just barked in the middle of this. Sorry about that.
Brilliant, brilliant. Yeah, so if we look at dedicated internet access, for those kind of sites, or even those homes that maybe have got super critical needs, I'm looking at sourcing DIA across Europe for regularly for £200 to £300 for 100 meg symmetrical service these days,
Wow.
and that
Yeah.
is going to come. That is going to come with the strict SLAs and the business level break fix
Right.
responses that we
Right.
were kind of mentioning earlier on. And so as I say, if I'd be a savant if I could predict the future, I guess. But
Mm.
you know, I guess my opinion here, virus allowing, is we will end up in a new balance of a hybrid. And yes, there will be much more home working in that mix.
Hmm.
Uh,
So, if
yeah,
that's the case,
yeah,
do you think this affects the WAN manager? I mean, specifically, we're
yeah,
curious if we think anyone's. I don't know, but it seems possible that, like I said, I've talked to some folks who actually do source some connectivity for their executives. Do you
yep.
ever see that becoming something the WAN manager does for their remote employees? Yeah.
Um, Possibly. I mean, I definitely think that if you, as a WAN manager, together with the IT and application architecture teams, have to make sure that the environment supports home working. As a business, we decided on Thursday, the 12th of March, we were going to take our whole company home working from the following day. And we did. 12 hours later,
Wow. Yeah.
Everybody was working from home. Everybody was already set up. We had everything in place. Laptops, fast home internet, application and data were all cloud-based, and we had multi-factor security in place that everybody was familiar with. And so, right now we're drifting back to the office in some parts, which is nice. But we're close to still being 100% home working business. But we are missing the office,
Yeah,
especially the coffee
absolutely.
machine.
Yeah, people like community. There's no doubt about it. Yeah.
Indeed, indeed. And but on the other hand, I friends and associates of mine I've been chatting to over the past couple of months haven't all told such a happy story.
Mhm.
Many of them spent the first few weeks firefighting to get their employees up and running, and even today, what is it? 10 weeks into this from
Right.
from from where I am. Um, some businesses and institutions are only just about getting to grips with the tech and the people elements of doing this well. So, so absolutely, the WAN manager together with the IT and applications folks need to reflect on what's worked and what's not, and then
Mhm.
work with the wider business leadership to understand and decide on that future working mode. Um, and it might be that, yes, for certain segments of the business that or certain roles within the business, that it becomes essential to have a fully assured and controlled means of connectivity. So yes, I can see the WAN managers getting into that.
And is that something Global Internet could help them out with? Even though it might be, in some cases, there's not even quote unquote business broadband available.
Yeah.
Some residential areas do, to my knowledge.
Yep.
Is that
Yep.
your experience?
Uh, yes, indeed. And so if I've had a couple of inquiries from some of my customers already about our appetite for this. So we've got some early days discussions going on right now, and I'm considering whether and what we will offer. Um, yeah, to state the obvious, supporting end users at home is going to be quite different to what we normally do. But if the demand's there, yes, we have the capability to do it. We can sourcing business broadband gives us the sort of the right level of relationships, the right insights to be able to source broadband for people's homes as well. And we're also looking at what we can do with 4G and 5G for here, because for a handful of our own employees who did have some broadband challenges, as all this is going on, we were able to give them our mobile data solution. So which gave them an alternative. It gave them a backup, which meant they could be fully productive in their working lives.
Right, absolutely. So I've even heard of some uh, MNCs that sent at least some of their employees home with a small kind of SD-WAN device
Yeah,
that could do full SD-WAN functionality over your broadband connection, even if you only have something like ADSL. Then also if you have LTE or maybe even 5G, pretty much make sure you have total availability that way. So
yeah,
that's an
exactly,
interesting new way to
exactly.
think about it. Yeah. Excellent. Well, this has been really interesting, Mike. Any last thoughts to pass on to the WAN manager before we wrap things up?
Um, I mean, anybody who isn't thinking about an internet solution and a cloud solution for their
Hmm.
business, needs to, really does need to. Uh, it's if we didn't have enough compelling needs before all of this COVID situation kicked off, I
Absolutely.
think
Yeah.
it's obvious now that there's an economic imperative, that layers on top of the performance imperative that's been there for some while. So anybody looking to explore that, we'd be really really happy and willing to help them start to explore that journey.
Yeah, and a plug for my end of this conversation, right? Which is that I've written a lot personally. I mentioned this in my intro, but about just what the reality is in terms of switching away from an MPLS network to an internet, even if it's a hybrid. It really is the case, looking at the numbers, that you can save 40, 50, 60% of your total cost of ownership. So
Yeah.
we see that in the real world. If listeners want to get in touch, Mike, learn more about Global Internet, how can they do that?
Well, the best place to start is our website, globalinter.net. And there
Right.
you can find out more about what we do, and you can get information on internet product availability and pricing worldwide. That's freely available. And you can also request quotes direct from us there, or indeed make contact with one of our team. Or you can even look me up on LinkedIn. Happy to connect.
Excellent. And I should say, for ever since this company started, I've heard people refer to it as Global Inter, since the .net is the directory. So just to clarify, it is properly called Global Internet, right? So,
Yes, it did actually used to be called
oh,
globalinter.net,
it
but that
was
did
Global
confuse
Inter.
people.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes. Okay.
But it is Global Internet now, but it was globalinter.net, and the website is globalinter.net still.
Right. Got it. All right, so Mike, we close out every one of these episodes with our unrelated question of the week. So I'm gonna let you pick your question. You could answer, what is the first thing you plan to do when sort of public life gets all back to normal, such as that might be, or kind of what activity have you been missing the most, or maybe what was your favorite thing about quarantine? Some people have been actually enjoying certain aspects of being on lockdown.
Yeah, so I'm really looking forward to the cycle racing season restarting. So my son and I had a big season of racing planned all around the UK and into Europe, but that's somewhat obviously been put on hold. It's
Right.
looking now like racing will start at a local level in August, and the big races are going to be kicking off from September. And that probably all sounds a bit wholesome. So the thing I'm also really looking forward to is actually I'm badly missing my Friday nights down at the local pub for a good wind
Uh,
down from the working week.
Indeed. Well, those two things balance out, right? So
Yeah, yeah,
I'm a cycling fan, and I also cycle, but I also love beer, so I have to do one to counterweigh the other. So,
absolutely.
yeah, but I too, I'm really excited for something, some of the UCI kind of races to come back. We'll see. I
Yeah,
totally understand how once you get a cough in the peloton, it's can spread probably pretty rapidly, but
indeed.
we'll see. Yeah. Excellent. All right. Well, thank you so much. It's really been a pleasure, and I've learned a lot, even though I already knew a lot about you guys. So I hope that our listeners have picked up quite a few things as well.
Thank you. You're very welcome.
All right. Cheers. Thanks very much for listening. The WAN Manager podcast is brought to you by TeleGeography, a division of Primetrica Incorporated, and is edited and produced by Jane Miller. I wrote the theme song you're listening to right now, and we get administrative canine support from my dog Honeybun, who you might hear chiming in from time to time when the mood strikes her. If you want to learn more about our data, head over to telegeography.com, where you can find our blog that covers many of the topics we hit here, and you can sign up for our WAN Manager newsletter. Until next time, have a great day.